I always thought fate was a joke, some cruel fairy tale meant to trick people into believing their suffering had meaning. But when I opened my eyes that night and saw the glowing red thread coiling around my wrist, stretching across the room, and attaching itself to him, the son of the man who ruined my father's life, I realized fate wasn't a joke at all. It was a sick, merciless trap, and I was already caught in it. The first time I met Adrian Stone, I wanted to punch him so hard his perfect jawline shattered. He was arrogant, cold, the kind of guy who thought he owned the world just because his last name could open doors mine never could. Our families had been enemies for decades. My father still carried scars from the Stone family's betrayal, and I grew up hearing that the Stones were poison wrapped in tailored suits. I believed it with every fiber of my being. But believing something doesn't stop destiny from laughing in your face. It happened at a gallon, irony so thick it was practically choking. My mother forced me to attend, whispering that networking was the only way to save our family's dwindling business. I had promised myself I wouldn't drink, wouldn't make a scene. Then I saw him, Adrian Stone, standing there in the crowd like the world bent itself to make him shine brighter. And that was when I noticed Itha's faint, glowing string tied to my wrist, glowing like embers in the dark, stretching across the room until it looped around his. I froze. My throat went dry, because the stories were true. The soul thread wasn't just a myth. Only a rare few could see the mark of fated soulmates. It was supposed to be beautiful, miraculous. But all I felt was dread. He noticed me staring, his lips curling into a smirk that made me want to break his nose. Then, almost like fate itself was mocking me, his eyes flicked down to my wrist, and for a split second, I swore his pupils dilated in recognition. He could see it too. "Don't tell me you're seeing what I'm seeing," Adrian said later that night when he cornered me on the balcony. His voice was low, smug, but underneath there was something sharp, like he didn't want to believe it any more than I did. I should have denied it, should have laughed in his face. Instead, I whispered, "This has to be a mistake. Fate doesn't make mistakes." And that was the beginning of the war inside me between everything I'd been taught to hate and the burning pull of a thread I couldn't cut. The days after the gala blurred together. I tried to ignore it, telling myself that the thread was nothing but an illusion, some cruel hallucination. But it followed me everywhere: when I sat in lectures at Columbia, when I worked late nights at the cafe, when I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Always tugging, reminding me, and then Adrian started showing up. First, I thought it was coincidence. Running into him outside my campus library, spotting him across the street when I was grabbing groceries. But it wasn't coincidence. He wasn't even trying to hide it. "You're stalking me?" I snapped one afternoon when he appeared at my table in the cafe, sliding into the chair across from me like he belonged there. "Don't flatter yourself," he replied, smirking as he stirred his coffee. "If we're bound, it makes sense we'd end up in the same places." Bound. I spat the word like it was venom. "Don't act like this means anything. You're still a stone. And I'll never..." "Never what?" His eyes locked on mine, piercing, unrelenting. "Never want me? Never think about me when you're alone at night? Never feel the thread pulling tighter every damn day?" My stomach twisted, because he was right, and I hated him for it. The truth is, the soul thread isn't about choice. It's about inevitability. It makes you crave the other person like air. You can resist for a while, fight against it, but the more you deny it, the more it hurts. I tried drowning it with parties, hookups, anything to prove I wasn't chained to Adrian Stone. But the thread never wavered. And no matter who I touched, none of them fit. None of them clicked. It was him. Always him. One night, after weeks of fighting it, I broke. I found myself standing outside his penthouse, rain dripping down my face, my fists clenched. I should have turned back, should have walked away. Instead, I rang the buzzer. When he opened the door, his expression shifted from shock to something softer, something raw. "You came," he whispered. "I hate you," I choked out. "I know." And then his lips crashed against mine. It wasn't gentle. It was war, fire and fury colliding. Years of hatred and longing exploding in one reckless kiss. I shoved him against the wall, teeth clashing, hands grabbing, desperate like I'd been starving, and he was the only thing left to keep me alive. He kissed me back just as fiercely, like he was drowning too. When we finally pulled apart, breathless and trembling, I realized two things. 1, I had never felt more alive. 2, I was completely, hopelessly screwed. Loving Adrian was the most dangerous thing I could do. Our families would never allow it. My father would rather disown me than see me tied to a stone. And Adrian's world was built on power plays and loyalty tests. If they suspected weakness, they'd tear him apart. But the thread didn't care about any of that. It kept pulling us together, in stolen nights and whispered secrets, in touches that burned and glances that spoke louder than words. He wasn't the enemy anymore. He was the only one who saw me, who understood what it meant to carry the weight of a destiny you never asked for. And maybe that was why it hurt so much when I realized fate wasn't just binding us, it was setting us up for destruction. Because secrets don't stay hidden forever. And in America, in a city that never sleeps, love like ours was a loaded gun waiting to go off. The morning after that first kiss, I woke up in Adrian's bed with sunlight filtering through the blinds. My heart should have been pounding with regret, but instead it beat with a terrifying calm. I lay there, listening to his slow, steady breathing beside me, watching the red thread stretch lazily from my wrist to his. It glowed faintly in the light, almost smug. I wanted to cut it, to tear it off, to scream at fate for putting me here. But then Adrian stirred, his hand brushing against mine beneath the sheets, and I froze. His fingers curled around mine instinctively, like his body knew the truth even when his mind wouldn't admit it. And just like that, the fight inside me softened. But softness was dangerous. When I slipped out of bed and gathered my clothes, Adrian cracked one eye open. "Running already?" His voice was hoarse, rough from sleep, but there was that teasing edge he always carried. "I have class," I muttered, not meeting his gaze. "Right?" he said, sitting up and dragging a hand through his messy hair. "Class. Not because you're terrified of what last night means." I froze with my shirt half-buttoned. "You think you know everything, don't you?" He smirked, but there was no victory in it. "Not everything. Just you." For weeks, we lived in that fragile balancing, pretending we were nothing, him pretending he wasn't waiting for me to cave. And yet, every night, I found myself back at his place, or he'd show up at mine with that infuriating grin and some excuse that made no sense but still got him through the door. It wasn't love at first sight. It was something darker, something hungrier. When he kissed me, it was always rough, desperate. When we touched, it was like we were trying to tear pieces out of each other. And yet, afterward, when our bodies were tangled together and the world finally went quiet, there was a softness in his eyes that ruined me. "You don't have to keep fighting it," he whispered one night, his lips brushing the curve of my neck. "Yes, I do," I replied, though my voice trembled. "This can't last." But I didn't pull away. Then came the day it all nearly exploded. It was my father's birthday dinner, a rare occasion where the entire family gathered. My mother had decorated the house like it was Christmas, and my father was in rare spirits, laughing too loudly and drinking too much whiskey. But the warmth shattered when my uncle brought up the stones. "Adrian Stone is making waves in Manhattan real estate," my uncle said bitterly, stabbing his steak like it had personally offended him. Just like his father. Ruthless, arrogant. It's in their blood. My stomach twisted. I forced myself to chew slowly, to keep my expression blank. "Mark my words," my father said, his voice sharp with the kind of hatred that had been passed down like an heirloom. "The stones will fall, and when they do, I'll be there to spit on their ashes." Everyone laughed. Everyone except me, because even as I sat there, I felt the thread tug at my wrist, burning against my skin like a secret brand. I excused myself early, locking myself in the bathroom, pressing my fists to the sink until my knuckles turned white. My reflection stared back at me, hollow-eyed and guilty. How the hell was I supposed to tell them the truth? I didn't. Instead, I ran straight to Adrian's penthouse that night, still wearing my pressed dinner shirt and polished shoes. The moment he opened the door, I shoved him back and kissed him like I needed to erase my family's voices from my skull. He didn't ask questions. He just let me fall apart against him. Later, lying together, I whispered into the dark, "They'll hate me forever if they find out." He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "They already hate me. What difference does it make if they hate us both?" "That's not funny," I muttered. "It wasn't a joke," he said. And that was the first time I realized Adrian wasn't unshakable. He wasn't untouchable. Beneath the arrogance and the smirks, he was just as terrified as I was. The secrecy couldn't last. One afternoon, when I left Adrian's building, I didn't notice the car parked across the street. I didn't see the familiar figure inside, watching with narrowed eyes as I adjusted my jacket and checked my phone. I didn't know my cousin Daniel had followed me for weeks, suspicious of my late nights and flimsy excuses. 2 days later, the bomb dropped. My father barged into my room, his face red, his hands shaking. "Is it true?" he shouted before I could even set down my laptop. "Tell me it's not true. Tell me you're not." His voice broke on the word. "With him." Ice crawled through my veins. My mouth went dry. "Dad, you betrayed us," he snarled. His eyes were wild, like he couldn't even recognize me anymore. "After everything the Stones did to this family, Yumi owns son sleep with one of them?" I flinched at the word, at the disgust dripping from his tone. "It's not like that," I whispered. "Then what is it like?" His voice thundered through the walls. "Is this some sick rebellion? Some pathetic crush? You think love will erase blood?" I wanted to scream that it wasn't about choice, that fate had shackled me to Adrian before I even had a chance to fight. But the words stuck in my throat. In the silence, my father's face hardened. "From this moment," he said coldly, "you're no son of mine." I stumbled to Adrian's that night, shaking, my chest hollow. He opened the door and took one look at me before pulling me into his arms. "They know," I whispered into his shirt. He held me tighter. "So let them know." "You don't understand," I choked. "They'll destroy me for this." "Then let them try." His voice was steel, but his hands trembled where they held me. That night we didn't kiss. We didn't touch. We just lay there, wrapped around each other, the red thread glowing faintly in the dark like it was mocking us both. The weeks that followed were a blur of tension. My father refused to speak to me. My mother tried to bridge the gap, but her eyes were filled with quiet disappointment that cut deeper than any anger. Meanwhile, Adrian faced his own storm. His father had caught wind of our meetings, and Adrian confessed one night that he'd been threatened with being cut out of the family business. "They think I'm weak," he said bitterly, pacing his living room. "That loving you makes me vulnerable. They don't get it. They don't understand that you're the only thing keeping me from turning into them." I watched him, my chest aching. "So what now?" He stopped pacing, looked at me like I was the only answer that mattered. "Now we decide if fate is worth burning our lives down for." I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the thread hum against my skin. Was it worth it? Was any love worth destroying the only life I'd ever known? In the quiet, I remembered the way Adrian looked at Menet with hatred, not with expectation, but with something so raw it terrified me. I remembered the weight of his hand in mine, the way his voice softened only when he said my name. Maybe fate wasn't a trap. Maybe it was a chance. The decision came sooner than I expected. It was another gala, weeks later, hosted in the heart of Manhattan. Both families were present, circling each other like predators in designer suits. The air buzzed with tension, champagne glasses clinking like gunshots. I hadn't wanted to go, but Adrian insisted. "If we're going to do this, we can't hide forever," he said. Halfway through the night, my father cornered me near the bar. His face was stone. "Leave now," he ordered, "or don't bother coming home." And just like that, the world tilted. I could walk away, salvage what was left of my family's approval. Or I could stay, tethered to the man who ruined everything and saved me at the same time. I looked across the room, and there he was, Adrian. His blue eyes finding mine instantly, the thread between us glowing like fire. And I knew. I wasn't walking away. I crossed the room, each step heavier than the last, until I was standing in front of him. Conversations hushed. I followed. My father's voice roared behind me, but I didn't stop. I reached for Adrian's hand. His fingers tightened around mine without hesitation. And for the first time, we didn't hide. The silence that followed was deafening, a storm about to break. But in that moment, with his hand in mine and the thread binding us in full view, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Freedom, even if it destroyed us. The silence shattered like glass. My father's voice thundered across the gala hall. "Let him go!" His fury ricocheted off the walls, each word a bullet meant for both of us. Guests gasped, whispers spread like wildfire, but I didn't move. My hand remained in Adrian's, the thread burning between us. Adrian, infuriatingly calm, squeezed my hand tighter. His smirk was gone. In its place was something steady, unwavering. "You're going to have to get used to it, Mr. Carter," he said, his voice carrying through the hall. The air thickened. My father's face went crimson. "You think this is love? This is betrayal. You'll ruin him just like your family ruined mine." I swallowed hard, my chest aching. "Dad, stop." "No," he barked. "You've humiliated this family enough." His eyes flicked to Adrian with pure venom. "If you take another step with him, you're dead to me." The words hit harder than any slap. I wanted to crumble, but Adrian's fingers curled around mine, grounding me. I turned toward him, and the look in his eyes told me everything I needed. I wasn't alone. Not anymore. So I did the unthinkable. I held Adrian's hand higher, showing everyone the red thread that glowed faintly in the ballroom lights. A gasp echoed through the crowd. Some people leaned closer, squinting. Others recoiled as though fate itself had cursed us. Because not everyone could see the soul thread. But those who could, the elders, the ones who knew the myths, recognized it instantly. It wasn't just love. It was destiny. That night marked the beginning of open war. My father kept his word. I was cut off. Credit cards canceled. Locks changed. My name erased from family accounts as if I had never existed. I moved into Adrian's penthouse, not because it was glamorous, but because I had nowhere else to go. And for a while, it felt like we could make it work. Mornings with coffee and quiet laughter. Nights tangled in each other's arms. Moments where the world outside didn't matter. But the world always finds a way in. The stones weren't any better. Adrian's father summoned him into his office one evening. And when he returned, his jaw was tight, his hands clenched. "He told me if I keep seeing you," Adrian said quietly, "I'll lose everything. The company, the inheritance, my place in the family." I stared at him, my chest hollow. "And what did you say?" His eyes softened, but the storm in them didn't fade. I told him it wasn't his choice to make, but the truth lingered between us. Standing against our families wasn't just about love. It was about survival. The pressure mounted quickly. My cousins sent me threats masked as jokes. Adrian received anonymous texts warning him to cut the rope before it strangles you. Friends we once trusted started avoiding us. The city, so big and full of noise, suddenly felt suffocating. One night I snapped. "This isn't working," I said, pacing Adrian's living room. My voice cracked under the weight of exhaustion. "We're just waiting for someone to pull the trigger." Adrian watched me from the couch, his expression unreadable. "So what? We give up? Let them win?" "I don't know." My hands shook. "I don't know if I can keep doing this, living every day like a target." The silence between us was unbearable. Finally, he stood, closing the distance in 3 strides. His hand cupped my face, forcing me to meet his gaze. "You think I don't feel the same fear?" he asked, his voice low, trembling. "Every time I look at you, I wonder if it'll be the last time. But walking away, that's worse than death." Tears burned my eyes. I hated how much I believed him. Fate didn't wait long to test us. It happened on a rainy night in Brooklyn. We were walking home from a late dinner, the city slick with neon reflections, when a car screeched around the corner. The first bullet cracked the pavement inches from our feet. Adrian shoved me behind a dumpster, his arm shielding me as more shots rang out. My heart pounded, deafening, as I clutched the fabric of his jacket. By the time the car sped off, leaving only echoes and smoke, we were both trembling. They tried to kill us, I whispered, my voice breaking. Adrian's jaw clenched. No. They tried to scare us. But we both knew what it meant. This wasn't just family drama anymore. It was war. After that, paranoia became our shadow. Adrian hired security, though he pretended it was for business. I avoided my old haunts, sticking close to him, the thread pulling tighter with every passing day. But fate isn't all cruelty. One night, in the quiet after chaos, we found ourselves on his balcony, the city stretching endlessly beneath us. Rain had washed the air clean, and the lights of Manhattan glittered like stars. I leaned against him, my head on his shoulder. Do you ever think about what it would be like if we'd met under different circumstances? All the time, he admitted. What would we be? I asked softly. He turned to look at me, his lips brushing my hair. Still this. Always this. My chest ached, but it was the sweetest ache I'd ever known. The final fracture came sooner than I thought. It was a Sunday afternoon when Adrian's father summoned him again. I waited outside the office, the silence suffocating, until Adrian emerged 30 minutes later. His face was pale, his eyes hollow. What happened? I asked, grabbing his arm. He gave me a choice, Adrian whispered. The company or you. My stomach dropped. And Adrian's silence was answer enough. Rage and heartbreak tangled inside me. So that's it? You're choosing them? No, he said quickly, grabbing my shoulders. Don't you see? That's what they want. They want to break us apart so they win. I won't let them. But his voice cracked. But if staying with me means destroying everything you have left, I don't know if I can be that selfish. I shoved him back, tears blurring my vision. You're not selfish for loving me. You're selfish for thinking you get to decide what I can handle. He stared at me, stunned. I already lost my family, I whispered, my chest shaking. Don't make me lose you too. For a long moment he said nothing. Then slowly his hand reached for mine. The thread between us glowed, fierce and unyielding. They can take everything, he said finally, his voice breaking, but they'll never take this. And he kissed me like it was the last time, but also the first, a promise written in fire and fate. The days after blurred into defiance. We stopped hiding. We walked the city hand in hand, daring the world to look. Paparazzi caught us once outside a restaurant, the headline reading Carter Air and Stone Scion. Forbidden romance or reckless rebellion? My phone buzzed with messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years, some supportive, most cruel. But I didn't care. For the first time in months I felt free. Adrian and I began to dream out loud. What if we left New York? What if we built a life somewhere else, away from the chains of our families? The thread hummed with possibility, as though fate itself leaned in to listen. And yet, part of me knew, fate doesn't let go so easily. The storm hadn't passed. It was only gathering. The night it all came crashing down. The city was buzzing with summer heat. Adrian had been quiet all day, his phone buzzing constantly with calls he ignored. Finally, as we sat on the balcony, he turned to me. My father gave me an ultimatum, he said softly. I froze. Again. This time it's final, he whispered. Tomorrow morning, I either walk away from you, or I walk away from everything else. The words hung heavy between us. And what will you choose? I asked, my voice barely audible. He looked at me, his eyes burning with something fierce, something unstoppable. You. Always you. Before I could speak, he pulled me into his arms, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. And as the city roared beneath us, I realized fate hadn't trapped me at all. It had given me a reason to fight. Adrian's choice shattered everything. The next morning, headlines exploded. Adrian Stone resigns from family empire. Stock prices wavered. Investors panicked. and the stone patriarch all but declared war on his own son. But Adrian didn't care. He walked out of that skyscraper without looking back, his jaw set, his hand finding mine the moment the cameras swarmed us. And just like that, we were untethered, homeless in every sense of the word. But strangely, I'd never felt lighter. We spent days in a haze of cheap takeout and empty apartments, laughing at how ridiculous it was to go from penthouses and mansions to borrowed air mattresses and ramen noodles. I teased Adrian about how badly he folded laundry. He teased me about how I still used my mother's lasagna recipe like it was sacred scripture. For a little while, it felt like maybe just maybe you had outrun the storm. But fate wasn't done with us. It was late one night when the knock came. Sharp, unrelenting. I opened the door to find my father standing there. His face was thinner, older, as though hatred itself had hollowed him out. "Dad," I whispered. "Step outside," he ordered. Adrian appeared behind me instantly, his arm brushing mine. "He's not going anywhere," Adrian said flatly. My father's eyes flicked to the thread at our wrists, glowing faintly in the dim light. His jaw tightened. "You really chose him over us." "I didn't choose him over you," I said, my voice trembling. "I chose myself. I chose love." "Love." His laugh was bitter, broken. "Love doesn't erase betrayal. Love doesn't fix blood debts. One day you'll see." "Enough," Adrian cut in. His voice was steady, but his body was tense as steel. "You've spent your whole life drowning in hate. Don't drag him down with you." For a moment I thought my father would strike him. His hand twitched, his face a mask of rage. But then, slowly, he lowered it. "You're dead to me," he whispered again, this time softer, almost mournful. Then he turned and walked into the night. The door closed with a hollow click. I stood there shaking until Adrian pulled me into his arms. "He'll never forgive me," I whispered. "Then let me forgive you enough for both of us," Adrian murmured. And somehow, in that moment, I believed him. The months that followed weren't easy. We faced whispers, judgments, the constant weight of being known not just as lovers, but as symbols of defiance. Some people romanticized us, calling us modern Romeos. Others spat in our direction, muttering curses as if love itself were a crime. But through it all, the thread never wavered. One evening, as autumn painted the city in gold, Adrian and I sat in Central Park with coffees warming our hands. He leaned against me, his hair falling into his eyes. "You know what's funny?" he said. "What?" "If someone had told me 2 years ago that my soulmate would be the son of the man my father hated most, I would have laughed in their face. And now," he looked at me, his smile soft, almost shy. "Now I think fate has a cruel sense of humor. But maybe it knows better than we do." I laughed, pressing my forehead against his. "You're getting sentimental." "Only with you," he whispered. "But love, no matter how strong, is never without scars." The hardest night came months later, when Adrian's father collapsed from a stroke. Despite everything, Adrian went to the hospital. I stayed in the waiting room, my chest twisting as hours passed. When he finally came out, his eyes were red. "He asked for me," Adrian whispered. "He said he regretted letting hate rule his life. He said if I wanted to be happy, I should be." I reached for his hand, squeezing it. "That doesn't erase everything," Adrian added, his voice sharp. "No," I said softly, "but maybe it's a start." And for the first time, I saw the weight lift from his shoulders. Years later, when people ask me about soulmates, I always hesitate. Because the truth is, it wasn't easy. It wasn't some magical fairy tale. Fate gave us a thread, yes, but we were the ones who had to decide what to do with it. And we chose to hold on. Even when it hurt. Even when it broke us. Even when the world told us we were wrong. Because love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing someone, again and again, no matter how much the world tries to tear you apart. The night Adrian proposed, the city was quiet, unusually gentle. We were back on that same balcony where everything began, the skyline glittering like a witness. He fumbled with the ring, his hands shaking. "I don't care about fate," he said, his voice breaking. I don't care about threads or families or curses. I just care about you. Will you marry me? Tears spilled down my cheeks as I laughed. You idiot, I whispered. Of course I will. And when he slipped the ring onto my finger, the red thread pulsed brighter than it ever had before, like fate itself was smiling. On the day we married, there were no fathers, no family names carved into the guest list. Just friends, laughter, and the quiet knowledge that we had survived. As we stood there, hand in hand, the world fell away. I used to think fate was a trap, I whispered to him. And now? He asked. I smiled through tears. Now I think fate gave me you. He kissed me, and for the first time in my life, the thread didn't feel like a chain. Felt like home. Years later, I sometimes catch sight of a faint glow still tied around our wrists. People say the thread fades after marriage, that love no longer needs proof. But ours never did. Maybe because it was never about fate forcing us together. Maybe because it was about us choosing to stay. Every single day. And so, against all odds, the boy I was supposed to hate became the man I couldn't live without. And that, I think, is the cruelest and kindest trick fate ever played. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.